back with another edition of The Exchange presented by Confederation Group. I'm Sam McNeil, as always, joined with Blake Doyle. This week, actually yesterday, I guess, some pretty exciting news for owners and operators on Prince Edward Island. The Atlantic bubble is set to open up July 3rd. What do you think about that?
That's great. Yeah, in fact, we were supposed to have some committee members who are involved with this process. We hope to get them on next week. But, this is a period of great, I guess there's two opinions on opening the bubble. I think many people are excited to get off the island, to have family come and visit. And there's still a lot of people that are not very excited to open up the province to the public. So, and once the gates are open, they're saying Atlantic Canada, there's no way to prevent people from any place entering, I think. Although there's been no formal announcement on that. What are you hearing, Sam? Do you think, is it welcome news?
Well, I think, and especially since we really, like last weekend, we got our first batch of cottage owners that kind of did the process from June 1st on or whatever. And then now they're kind of coming accustomed and they're doing their quarantining. I think overall it's good news because just based on our tourism industry is so robust that we need the income. Obviously there's people who have cushy government jobs maybe that are thinking, oh, well, let's keep it closed, but they're not the ones relying on the income to keep their lights on at their house or pay their mortgage bills. So I do see both sides of it. But the second wave of this, or the next steps, is inevitable. We have to open up the economy, and this is step one to doing so. I also think that just Canadian ethics like ethics law in general, is that, or the Constitution in general, I should say, is that once Atlantic Canada opens up, why can't other Canadians come? They still can come and do the 14 days of self-isolation, but I think it'll come a time where you can't restrict people from moving freely within Canada, and that we're going to have to open up the entire to everybody within the Canadian borders.
So we are on a state of emergency until the 28th. When that emergency period lifts, they've opened it up to the, post Canada Day celebrations. They've allowed people to come on the 6th. If you want to travel through PEI to get to the Madeleines, you need a notice from Quebec. Nova Scotia is certainly open to the world. I think there's no question this is going to be difficult to contain. And when you see the viral outbreaks, primarily in the US, with still some issues in Quebec and in major centers, but they're hitting all-time new highs, in the US and states like Florida at 5,500 and Texas. So this virus, the first wave of the virus hasn't gone away. And I think that's the issue, not so much with the government employees who may have opinions on it, but I think certainly people who are more vulnerable and older people are reasonably vocal on their opposition to have visitors come, and they don't see the benefit. The economy needs them. The economy knows the benefit. The business groups want them, but there's a voting bloc that still are not happy. So these are the perils of politics and making difficult decisions.
I agree, and I think that PEI will benefit the most from the bubble, just on the fact that no one's really rushing to go to Moncton or Halifax, but people
Costco, they're lined up to go to Costco.
The lineups are maybe Angie's if they're allowing that kind of thing. But I don't think that people are going to be rushing to so much to Halifax as they would be to rushing to get a cottage on PEI for a weekend away. That's just my opinion. I do plan on going across sometime in July, but it's only for a weekend. It wouldn't be for an extended period of time. But I do think due to our tourism and our restaurants and whatever the case may be, golf courses, we will see a bigger influx of people coming here than us going there. And the idea of the Atlantic bubble is to kind of keep all the area afloat in terms of tourism, but we will definitely benefit the most, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think we'll be a disproportionate benefactor, and that's great. We're a beautiful island, a place people want to visit in the summer. Even Newfoundland, which historically I used to be in the tourism sector actually for how many years? Maybe 25 years. And, we always had a big influx of people from Newfoundland those first 2 weeks of July. So opening at the right time, hopefully we'll get a benefit from all these regional provinces, sister provinces. But I think the gates are open to the world. And I think you're going to see people from not just Canada, but outside of Canada start to locate, migrate, and come to visit, either for short term or maybe on a more permanent basis, because we have a sanctuary that's been pretty well protected against COVID.
And I don't even think it's not even the business aspect. It's also the mental health aspect in terms of seeing family members. Because think of all the newborns that would have been born over the last 3 months that couldn't see grandparents, aunts, uncles. I think being able to reconnect with family in the Atlantic region will definitely be a morale booster for everybody. So I'm thinking that might, maybe that'll help people spend more money when they're out and about too, if they're here with family or over there with family. But yeah, so the Atlantic bubble comes into effect July 3rd. So I would assume if you're gonna go at 12:01 on July 3rd and line up at the bridge, because that Friday at lunchtime it'll be bigger than any lineup, probably bigger than the Costco lineup to either coming or going. So make sure you do it early if you do it.
We'll have to get
Um,
our exchange drone out there to take pictures
yeah.
so we can use them on our
Yeah, well,
podcast.
that would actually be a pretty cool drone shot,
Yeah.
the car lineup. But it'd be bigger than country concerts lining up over there. Also, so that's into effect in a couple weeks. Phase 4 opens tomorrow, so we'll see a little lessened of restrictions. So it'd be more so for, like, I think, bigger gatherings like churches or weddings or whatever the case may be. But up to 50 people, but it has to be an organized event. You can't just have a party in your backyard, Blake. You have to be a licensed or a registered organization.
We're going to have alcohol and haircuts. So both of which we have experienced lots of during the COVID pandemic. And yeah, so what is 50 people though, right? We can
Up
have
to
a pretty
50,
good,
yeah. Pretty big shaker.
My hair is not that big, but we do have DJ equipment. So
Perfect.
We can actually host a party. It could be a very active spot here for a few nights.
Yeah, and I think overall the phase 3 went pretty well with restaurants having the up to 6 people at a table. One concern I've had is that golf courses still only allow one person per golf cart, and I usually walk anyways. But the idea that you can sit in a restaurant with 6 people from different houses, but you can't sit in a golf cart with one other person when you're outside anyways. So I'm hoping government will change that, because it's a little pricier when you do go to golf, and it's harder on the golf carts and gas bills for golf course owners as well.
And you see even the tee times now have started to relax a bit. I've noticed they used to be like 15-minute departures. Now they're 8 minutes, what I've observed at least. And, I think all these things are going to become a little bit more relaxed. There will be another impact. And, we have passed legislation, this setting, to give government more powers to act quickly and swiftly and make, I guess, important sort of decisions on behalf of the public. So enjoy the freedom while you have it. One of the ads they have, which somebody pointed this out to me, it says, I forget the term, enjoy your new freedoms. Like, it's almost like they acknowledge they've stripped away the civil liberties of the population. They're gradually giving them back in some, paternalistic kind of fashion. But anyway, let's enjoy it while we have it. The weather's good. It's great to be.
And we can't really beat the weather the past couple of weeks, and it's nice to see people, like, even by the surrounding, you can see that I'm back in my office. I left my Cornwall office to my Grafton Street office, but even seeing people out walking out and about, like, they're either wearing masks or social distance. It's nice to see that everyone's a little less conservative than they were maybe 8 weeks ago.
It's great to see you back in the office, and I see you must be trying to get Dennis King's attention by having that half jersey behind
the Belleville jersey. Yeah, there's no shortage of halves memorabilia in here. So we're still on the topic of the legislature. The Green Party, the official opposition Green Party, brought up a new motion to kind of get the idea around a 4-day work week. And I think they didn't really give the nitty gritty of it. I think it's just to start the conversation. But their idea was that you would work 10 hours a day for 4 days versus 8 hours a day for 5 days. I'm sure people will misinterpret it any other way, and I think there's pros and cons to both sides. But what do you think about the idea of a 4-day work week?
Well, I'm kind of curious. I guess the way that the process was introduced is kind of maybe you've seen this before. To me, it seems kind of innovative and strategic. It's a non-binding sort of statement, but what it does do is open the door for conversation. I think one of the outcomes of this pandemic process is going to be a recognition that people can work differently and they can work effectively. A concern I have, and I think where we're going to get to, especially in the public service, is are people going to work 4 days a week at the same pay as 5 days a week? And I think, sure, maybe you're going to claim to work 10 hours a day, but that's really not practical for most people. Can the economy even endure? Like, how many businesses can justify having people not available during business hours or extending business hours to 10 hours a day? So I think the only applicability probably will be to government. And I think the accountability will be a problem to measure, are people delivering what they should be in the time that they have with the distractions that you might find at home? There's lots of rationale to look at this kind of thing, including having kids at home that have to be managed in an environment where you don't have camps, you don't have childcare. But we'll see. I think the conversation's open. It's on the floor of the legislature. It's a first pass. It stimulates a discussion where it's not going to go away. It'll be addressed by government. I'm concerned about the net cost of business, and depending on what legislation looks like, it could be very impactful.
And I think it would have to certainly stem from government. Like government would have to take the lead, implement it, and then business would eventually follow. And it would have to be like a staggered model. Like I know what you mean. You can't just close on Fridays and not have business open. It would have to be maybe there's one person takes a day off Friday, or there it's I don't know how it would work. It would shift around, but you couldn't, like you said, you couldn't just shut down one day, extra day a week because there'll be emergencies or someone would have to rush in and get something through. I know in our line of work, like you can't just take one day off because you feel like it and have no one in the office. There's always things that pop up and have to be pushed forward.
What do
My
you think?
idea, my would be, oh sorry, my idea would be more of a hybrid model in terms of working from home and maybe working in the office. Like I don't think just a cut and dry 4-day work week where you have Fridays off or Mondays off or whatever. I think if you could do it where you worked so many hours at work or so many hours at the office and so many hours at home, some sort of happy medium would be a better alternative in terms of actual productivity, because I think just taking Fridays off, you're not going to do anything. You're going to be at the beach in the summer or sleeping in the winter.
There's a lot of distractions. I think that's where the accountability comes in. But if you look at implementing this exclusively at government, which is probably who will lead this thing, it will most likely be business unless it's mandated by the employees. If you work at Access PEI, how do you work a 10-hour day at home? I mean, there's certain segments of the economy and of the public sector that just cannot participate in this. Then you get this, disparate kind of relationship between employees, either in private or public. So I think it creates a little bit of strain in the labor market. We'll see how it's addressed. But at this point, it's just a concept that's been introduced. It's strategic on behalf of the opposition party because it does open it up. It's non-binding. It's just a discussion. But I think there'll be a lot of people that will have comments about it. In this environment, it's pretty hard to say much because what are your options? People are working from home. It's necessary for health and for, to continue in organized fashion. I don't know. Anyway, we'll see where it goes. I will leave it to our legislators legislators.
And I definitely agree, but I think throughout COVID, we've proven that productivity can be higher. I don't think the 4-day work week is the conversation. I think it's more of a blended model with working from home, whether that's 6 days a week, 7 days a week, 2 days a week, whatever number you pick. I don't think that's the important part. I think it's the idea of implementing a more come and go scenario where you can be productive at home, but also be accountable at the office. I know that holds me accountable if I have to show up at a certain time at a certain place, instead of saying, okay, well, I have this to do today and I have this many hours to do it, kind of thing. But I can see both sides of it, and I'm sure the CBC comments and Guardian comments on Facebook will reflect it. Some people, whether, like you said, you can't take the extra 2 hours because you'd have to pay more on childcare those 4 days versus the 1 day. And even the premier said, well, I agree with the concept, but we'll have to do some more discussions. So I think everyone likes the idea of an extra day off, but whether it's justifiable, we will see.
And whether the economy can actually support it. It's one thing to survive a pandemic by adapting. It's another thing to have large swaths of the economy unproductive during productive times. And it's a global connected economy. We'll see. I want to make sure, I guess, that there's not a wage escalation as a consequence of introduction of this thing. And hopefully that's considered as well. So. Look, I've got a SpaceX shirt on. I don't know if you can see this, but this is sort of in honor of the Starlink, the new satellite service that Elon Musk through SpaceX have deployed. And Elon has made a commitment that this will be supported for Canada, and primarily Eastern Canada. Prince Edward Island now will have access to a non-terrestrial based internet service. So anyone who's interested, you can go on to Starlink. They've got a little site. You can pop your name in and get updates, and we're going to see that not later than the fall. So it's going to majorly disrupt traditional carriers with a high-speed, rural, accessible internet. It's going to be good during a pandemic. It's going to be good for business. It's going to be good for even traveling public who come to PEI and can't connect to the internet. But I've changed the subject. We can talk about.
Well, no, just so
SpaceX.
Everyone's clear, we are definitely not funded by SpaceX or Elon Musk, but we are supporters of their products. And Elon Musk is a natural disruptor, and I think we both emulate that as well. That we like to change the status quo and make new things happen.
So disruption is good, and there's all kinds of things being disrupted by COVID. One of the things that could be disrupted probably is some of our traditional process. I think the healthcare system had a great opportunity to be disrupted. They lost that opportunity now, and they're back to status quo. I think the budgeting process could be disrupted. We talked about that a little bit in the Guardian this weekend as well.
I think that's one thing that kind of got overlooked with this big bubble announcement is that, all right, well, the budget was last week. Now there's a bubble. Ooh, I can go shopping, or I can go, or tourists can come here. We can make more money or spend more money or see family. And that the budget kind of got overlooked. And I think you did talk about that a lot in this coming weekend's Business Edge, but the budgeting process in general is old fashioned. It's been the same way for the last however many years. And I do agree with your sentiment that it has to be disrupted, it has to be changed, and maybe the old ways of just consultations in the community, or I don't know how, whatever way they do it now, we have to make a new way of doing things, and how everybody gets taken care of, and not overspend or bump up salaries during a pandemic.
Yeah, I see all kinds of opportunity, and this venue provides government. I know they weren't prepared for this and weren't organized. They responded and adapted the best they could, but we will never have another opportunity in business. Business has been disrupted and will continue to be disrupted. There's major changes that have started and are going to affect people very directly over the course of the next 18 months to 5 years. And this has already occurred, and you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. I think government has a real possibility to embrace this disruption. But the 4-day work week is part of that. Like, that really does change the way that work is done. But they got to rip the Band-Aid off and make some decisions. And if they don't quickly, they'll have missed their window.
One place actually that I'd like to, my license expired a couple months ago, but during COVID, they weren't open, so I couldn't go get it renewed. And now that when I go to liquor, I still haven't got it because the lines are long, but that's something you could have implemented online or did whatever. I know it would have been quick on the draw, but a lot of other companies put in online implementation for whether it's e-commerce or whatever the case may be for services, that government probably could have followed suit. So actually, every time I go to, well, my example is the liquor store because I still get ID'd. You might not because of your gray hair, but
not. No, I might ask to get ID.
But I bring up the website, PI government website. It says, "Oh, your ID's expired. It won't work." I just pull up the website. It says, "Well, July 6, 2020, all licenses and registrations are good until then." So I'm sticking with that until July 6th.
Well, you want to avoid those lineups. I don't know if you've driven by Access PEI, but there's huge queues of people trying to get in to take care of these things. But we talk about disruption. It is appropriate, and government have been moving to more electronic services. They have to, but that's also impacts the labor market and it displaces people. And these are the kind of displacements that you're going to see across every segment of our economy, and it's certainly affecting the business community today. So we do have can you speak much? I mean, we had the business continuity group. Is that what they're referred to as, that are providing some guidance? We haven't heard much from them, which is kind of consistent with sort of the first group that kind of emerged. Is there any dates that they're going to have reports? We hope to get them on. In fact, I'm sure we will maybe next week. But have you heard of any sort of milestones that we're going to get some updates other than the end of August when they have the final report?
Not overly. I just other than a couple of conversations with people in terms of it, I think they were obviously their biggest push was that Atlantic bubble because they realized that they're not going to I think government's plateau was if we could reach 10%, which is 50 million of the 500 million, we'd do okay. But if we didn't have the Atlantic bubble, I don't even think we would reach the 10%. Obviously, supporting local is great, but it only goes so far because we need to export things, or we need tourists with boots on the ground here to actually use our services or purchase our products.
10%, boy, if that was your goal you're trying to achieve in school, you'd be not achieving much. But anyway, hopefully we can shoot a little bit higher than 10%, and this bubble might get that.
I think so too, and I think if we could reach 10% or over, that's great. That's probably still a little optimistic based on how much foot traffic we have, over 1 million night stays every year. That just won't happen, but I'm optimistic that things will get a little better. And you never know, maybe by August, all of Canada will be allowed to come without self-isolating. But one last note I wanted to touch on is that I guess it'd be a week ago, that CERB got extended another 8 weeks. So I think companies are finding trouble finding summer students or summer positions before COVID. During COVID and with CERB, obviously it was even more challenging. But now with that additional 8 weeks, why would someone who's my age, let's say, or even older, and have kids at home or whatever the case may be, why would they go and find work when they could make the same amount at home until the middle of August doing nothing?
That's a tough dilemma. These are big policy, social challenges, and I think this is part of the entitlement almost that some of these programs have resulted in. And I will still come back to the fact that the government, they shut the economy. They had to intervene. They did the right things. They stimulated activity. They may be stimulating for a long time, but they got to taper some of these things off. Today, I tried to go out and have breakfast early this morning, with a group of people, just have a conversation. There's nothing open. The mainstay restaurants you'd expect to go to, nothing's really open before 8 a.m. And the reason is they can't find staff. So when you see the impact to businesses that traditionally would thrive on the morning traffic of restaurant goers, and they're not able to get staffing, I think that underscores the problem, because we do have a pretty robust seasonal workforce and they're not working.
Were you
Now,
happy because you didn't have to pay? That wasn't
I
open?
was very happy. And in
You
fact,
left
I
your
was
wallet
hoping
at
not to
home.
pay anyway. But, as people, and the CERB is tapering, some people are having their benefits starting to be cut back this week. By not engaging in the labor market doesn't create the opportunity. And, the seasonal economy is short. It's probably not going to extend into the fall. So there's going to be a jeopardy on what you do. What does government do? Do they change the mechanics of the Unemployment Insurance Act to allow to brace through the winter? Do they continue to offer CERB or some other substitute? What does that do to businesses that still can't find people and can't provide a valuable service to the economy and the community?
And obviously, it's been talked on 100 times that we're so uncertain of what the fall may hold. Like obviously, the government's planning for school to go back. Universities have adapted, but this could be the tip of the iceberg in terms of economic shutdown. We could go triple, double, or double, triple, quadruple this in the fall or into the winter, because we don't know. Based on this, we're just basing it off historical trends from once in a century type crisis. So we really don't know what it might look like, and if the spending's bad now, what's it going to be like in 6 months' time?
These are the challenges with the forecasting process. Maybe that all needs to be revisited. But one thing about school, kids do have to get back. I think that there's a lost semester that'll never be recovered. There's loss to our future because of that. But we've also realized that children aren't viral vectors anymore. They don't get affected really. Now they can spread it, but if we can contain them, and maybe we have to limit exposure to grandparents, but having them back in a socialized setting is good for the students. You mentioned mental health of everybody, but it's also good for the economy, because that education environment is also important to free people to get back to their places of work. So having school resume is really important. And in some cases, it's going to be very different. Universities are doing it online. It's going to be a choppy kind of transition, but maybe there's schools, maybe Holland College use this pivot to pick up more international students that can be trained and educated in different environments. So there'll be some shakeout, and the first movers, the most organized institutions, will benefit, including education.
I would have to agree, and I think our office will be always open if they need a location to come and learn.
Well, yeah, and we didn't close. We have maintained social distancing. You're there today by yourself, and we'll adapt as people are comfortable and the economy provides. But we're not out of the woods yet, and we'll continue to pivot and adapt as every other company has to as well.
And we wish we had all the answers, but unfortunately we don't. We just make educated guesses as best we can and try to provide some insight or solutions.
So anything you'll be watching for next week? The House is still sitting. I guess they're going through estimates probably before they can actually get out to the golf course.
There's been I don't know if they must have turned the AC on because they're not rushing to get out yet. But there's been like committees. They have 2 committees in the morning, or 1 committee, and then 2 in the afternoon. Like it's in between the sessions because they want to get committees over with at the same time. Because whenever the House closes, that's when committees usually start up. But now that the House has been going so long, they have no choice. And that's where a lot of the work gets done, is in committee, because it's a less people and more pinpointed discussions. But the biggest thing I've found is, like, in terms of communications with a couple different MLAs, some are saying they could be in 3 weeks, some are saying they could be out next week. There's not really, like, usually you're able to kind of guess where it is, but because this is such a unprecedented time, they really don't know what's going to happen, or who's going to put up a stink about one line item in the budget, or in terms of whatever legislation's on the floor.
Well, back to this bubble or bauble that's captivated the attention of the populace. Is that strategic? Is that ingenious sort of strategy by the government to announce this to divert people's attention? Or is it just happenstance that they are opening things up as they've released a budget? I mean, it is ironic timing, but it certainly has deflated much conversation on a deficit.
I don't know if it was a tactic to take away, but I think one of my like a big role model of mine in terms of politics is actually Steve McNeil, and it's clear that he kind of has taken a lead. I know Dennis King announced a couple weeks ago that they might do it, but Steve McNeil definitely, and from my experience at those Council of Atlantic Premiers meetings, he does really take a lead role, and he's the loudest voice in the room because he wants things to be done right the first time. And he's the type of guy who doesn't pussyfoot around issues. He will stick to an issue and stick to his plan and not go around it, obviously with some additions or subtractions, but he sticks with his decision and goes forward. So I think he would have been loud at the table to open up the bubble. And based on, because Nova Scotia has such a larger population than PEI, and they haven't had a case in almost 2 weeks now. And they have 0 active cases, I believe. They're back to 0. So I think he is a very strong leader in this, and I think all the premiers would have put in their 2 cents, but I think he was one, in my opinion, who really wanted to get the bubble open.
It'll be interesting to see, and unfortunately, there probably will be some spikes, and how these different provinces respond to that. At what level do you sort of declare we've got to, create some kind of cloistered environment to kind of contain this thing? How does that affect the other provinces? How does it move to protectionist and border closing? And there's big impacts. And I'm an advocate. I think they probably did close things a little bit quickly. Don't think they'll ever close it again. They can't. It's just a matter of how you manage within your environment, and do you enforce mask wearing? Do you take precautions that are within your control without actually suspending commerce? And I don't know. These are. It'd be very interesting to see. My thoughts on it. We'll see what happens over the next 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, and it'll be the case study for in 100 years' time when my kids and grandchildren have to deal with it, I guess. But we'll see as time goes on.
It may not be. There'll be COVID-23. Like this is not an unusual environment. These viruses are going to be popping up, I suspect, just based on human behavior and proximity to other things. So we're just one of a wave of things we're going to have to adapt to.
And that's what we're in the business of: adapting, pivoting, and making the best of the situation we're given.
So speaking of which, adapting and pivoting, there's a big announcement coming from Confed. We won't say too much about it, but I think we should be talking about that another session, about some changes that are happening. And you can check that out at confederation.com, which will be the new launch of the site. There's some prototype stuff up there now, but that's going to be exciting as we actually pivot and make some amendments and try to address this change in the market.
Yep, and that's more to come on that. We'll give you a little teaser, but yeah, plenty of things to come throughout the summer. But we will certainly be enjoying the hot weather as we go on as well. But this has been another edition of The Exchange presented by Confederation Group. I'm Sam McPhail. With me, Blake Doyle. We'll see you next week and see how the bubble goes.
Bubble on.